thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fuad Kassab. Hello everyone, welcome to A Quirky Journey. This is Jo, your host, and I'm really excited to be back for the year. So we've had a bit of a break over the holidays. School holidays finish next week, so thought we better get the podcast up and going again. We decided to have a good long break over Christmas this year because last year was totally crazy. And I counted up how many cities we visited, and it was 17 last year, plus a few bits and pieces extra, plus, you know, all the online stuff and the podcasts and the we've done a lot last year. So Fuad and I have been having a big long break. He's not back yet, but I thought I'll go ahead and get the podcast started and get a few recorded because I'm off to Spain and Paris. So I haven't quite finished my holidays. I'm having a little bit of work in between and then going away with my two eldest kids. They've been learning Spanish for a few years. And so we decided we'd go to Spain and do some practice and just have a bit of a mum and kids getaway. So it's going to be great fun. We're doing a road trip around South Spain and visiting friends in Paris. So it's going to be really exciting. So I'll be away from the 1st of February until the 20th. And then I'll be back. But I thought I'll get a couple of podcasts up for you guys for while I'm away. And so that you can, you know, start listening again. I've had a few people say, oh, I miss your podcast. So thought we better get started. So it's been really good to have a big long break though, and I hope you guys all had some time off over Christmas and over the school holidays and got to get away and just relax a bit. So meanwhile, settle in and have a listen to this podcast. It's a really good one. I interviewed Sharon from The Functional Family, and the links to her website and Facebook and Instagram are in the show notes. And Sharon she reminds me of myself in a lot of ways. She's learnt about her kids, how to help her children with ADHD. She's learnt this all herself by researching and talking to professionals, but also just through the everyday living of it. And she's really found strategies over the last 10 years. She's worked out strategies and ways to support her children just by experimenting herself and figuring it out. And she's just so practical because, you know, maybe you'll go to a practitioner and get a diagnosis for ADHD, but then you don't know what to do next. And she really gives awesome practical advice for how you can support your children and how you can support yourselves as parents, because I know it gets very overwhelming when you've got special needs kids, kids with anxiety, kids that are struggling at school, struggling with being overwhelmed, struggling with self-esteem, struggling with all the things that these kids struggle with. And parents can feel quite alone and overwhelmed. And so this program that Sharon's put together is really, really helpful. And I think you're going to get a lot of good advice from this podcast. And I hope you'll go and check out her website. And I'm really thankful to have found Sharon. I was recommended her through a mutual friend who's a naturopath. And it's been great chatting to her. We've had lots of chats offline as well. So enjoy the podcast. And I hope you get lots out of it. And I'll be back in 2 weeks with another podcast that is also, I feel, sort of moving on from this into more of the diet side of things, how to work on helping kids with special needs who are really fussy eaters and what steps you can take to help them eat better. And that one will be with an occupational therapist. So that'll be in a fortnight's time. So every fortnight on a Friday, tune in and subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever podcast app you use on your phone, and then you can download it to listen to later. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a great week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sharon from the Functional Family. So good to have you with me, Sharon.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Jo.
Well, we've been having a little chat before we went on air, and Sharon's been telling me about what she does, but I said, well, just wait and tell everyone else. So can you tell us what you do at the Functional Family?
Yes, of course. So the Functional Family is basically a website that offers online courses for parents that are struggling. So at the moment, our focus is very much about our Calming the Chaos course, which is for parents of children that have ADHD, ADD or anxiety. So it's about the grassroots base level sort of stuff, like how do you get the child out of the house for the school day, meal planning, organising the home, visual cues, all that sort of stuff, just to help the families. Our aim is to bring back joy for these families who may be struggling under the pressures of this. Yeah, so that's basically what we do.
That's so good, because I know when we first started having struggles with Isaac with the anxiety and the OCD, I remember he was about, well, I guess you can see things all through their childhood when you understand what's going on. But I remember when he was about 11, and we'd always homeschooled, and then we decided to try putting them in school a couple of days a week at the private school that we homeschooled through. And that it did my head in trying to get him out the door. He couldn't even get his socks on. He couldn't, it was tears every morning. It was so stressful. And we eventually, after 2 terms, gave up and went back to homeschooling. So I'm really interested to hear, all these strategies that you have. But maybe you could start off with telling us your story and how you got into this.
Okay, so it is really a passion project for me, the Functional Family, because I married a guy that has a very severe ADHD. So severe, he was banned from the classrooms, never got invited to a birthday party. Just absolutely, his mum's memory of school for him was sewing buttons back up on his shirt after fighting the whole day. So he had a very intense childhood with this ADHD, and back in the day it wasn't very understood either. So I married this man who is incredibly brilliant and wonderful, but has incredibly severe ADHD.
Obviously, and he learnt to cope as an adult, and
he does. Yeah, he does. He's learnt to manage it and sort of mask it fairly well, but he still very much has ADHD. He only has 2 modes. There's incredibly hyperactive mode or sleep. And there's no in between. And then we went on to have 3 little boys together. And the eldest of mine has ADHD and learning difficulties as well. So when I had my son, I quickly identified that he had ADHD. He was just so much like my husband that they're just 2 peas in a pod. Yeah. And I looked at the statistics, and and we went to the pediatrician, and we got told that he was 4 times more likely to commit suicide. He was going to 4 times more likely to commit crime, end up in jail, become an addict. And I just decided right then and there that under no circumstances was any of those statistics going to apply to my beautiful little boy. And so what followed was 10 years of obsessive research for me and trial and error. And we must have spent about $25,000 in medical costs. And, I was just going to beat this. I was going to fix him. And it was this big process for me and as a family as well to help him become functional. And what we ended up with was a sort of procedures as a family to help us all function better with 2 members that have such high levels of ADHD. So we developed ways to become functional and happy. It's not perfect, but we became functional and happy. And that's why I wanted to help other people do the same.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. So I think you were saying to me earlier that when you first got married and, started your own family, you didn't understand. How did you learn about ADHD? Did you know about it before you married your husband, or were you had been exposed to it a little bit. My brother was treated for ADD as a child, and I did used to nanny a little boy that had ADHD. So I had a little bit of background, and these people seem to gravitate towards me, and I kind of love them. I think that
ADHD.
You have an understanding of them, obviously.
Yeah, well, I don't know why, but it's just something that has kind of gravitated towards me throughout my life. And I feel that they're really misunderstood. It's a neurological condition that is really understood. And I want to increase awareness and fight for these guys. I mean, in the hunter and gatherer days, these guys would have been celebrated. They would have been the leaders of the pack. You know, they would have had the energy and hyperfocus to be the best hunters ever. But in today's world, where we're expecting them to be quiet and sit down and like be sedentary all the time, they're struggling and they need our understanding. And so that's what I want to bring to the world is how to understand these magical people. Yeah.
And what do you find is the most like the best part of this when you see their personality and how ADHD affects their character? What do you love the most about them?
Well, they're brilliant. You know, all you've got to do is find the bit where they're interested, the things that they're interested in. And once they have something that they're interested in, they can hyper-focus and they can be truly magical. Like I've watched my husband build a truck with his bare hands. You know, he's just able to do that. He never has read a manual in his life, but is just instinctually able to do these things. My son could ride a motorbike with no training wheels from 2 because that's what he was interested in. You know, like absolutely incredible if you can find the thing that they're interested in.
So once they find that, their determination to succeed in that area just helps them to be brilliant at it.
Yes, we've just got to nurture the things that they're interested in because then they are able to focus, you know, because ADHD doesn't mean they can't focus on anything. No. It just means that they're limited about what they can focus on. So they've got to find the stuff that they're passionate about and then they can focus.
And is it sort of like kids on the spectrum where if there's too much sensory input, they just feel overloaded? Is it like that overwhelm thing with too many things?
Yes. So a lot of the Calming the Chaos course is about the 3 things that we really suggest is routine is number 1, which we'll probably talk about later. Minimalism, so becoming a practical minimalist. So having too much sensory input in their rooms, in your home, in the classroom can really be quite distracting for them. And also high intensity exercise. So where there's a lot of studies out there that show that high intensity exercise is just as effective as medication for treatment for ADHD. So we want to encourage that as well. Yeah.
This is fascinating to me because my little brother was diagnosed ADHD when he was little, and he was the crazy kid running around hyper, all that kind of thing. Did not do well at school with his grades, but when he went off to TAFE and started studying business, he just took off, and it was like he found his niche, and now he's a very successful businessman. And it's really interesting to me to see how he does that, you know, that focusing in. And I've got another son. I have a son my eldest son who he's never been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure he is ADHD. And he's so much similar to my brother. And the thing that really helped him as a teenager and as a child and teenager was playing soccer. So that's that high intensity. And he always wanted a routine. Like he would ask me from the time he was really small, he would say, what is happening next? I need to know, can you write a list? What's happening today? You know, where are you going to be? Where am I going to be? What time is this? He wanted that routine. And I really noticed that with him, that's how he coped best. So
they really do. The routine is just incredibly important. And because behind ADHD is often a huge base note of anxiety.
Yes.
And they are worried about looking different. Yeah. And so
it was always his biggest struggle. They want to know routine. They want to know what's happening after that. They want to know what's happening so they can actually protect themselves. It's like it's a coping mechanism. And also because their brains are quite chaotic. You know, I can imagine it's like having a computer with lots of tabs open. Yes.
You know, there's a lot of computing
like that
sometimes. You know, so they want to have that routine, and part of the course is setting up that routine so that one activity automatically flows into another, and they're not using the brain space to try and remember what to do. You know, that it just kind of happens automatically, and it's so so important for these kids that they have that routine. I mean, my son, even as a baby, if you switched around, you did bath time before, we used to do bath time before dinner, and then if you switched that around, he just couldn't, he was unsettled the whole night. He needs that routine. He needs to know what's happening. It comforts him. That routine consistency makes him feel safe.
I found
so that's why it's important. Yeah.
I found that with my babies as well, and toddlers. Like, I stuck to quite a strict routine, and I had flexibility in there, but I found that like we all coped so much better if we had that regular routine. And I think it is, for most people, it really helps, especially ADHD. Can I just ask, what's the difference that you see with girls and boys with ADHD? Is there much of a difference?
Well, it can do. I mean, mostly ADHD is the rates are higher for boys, but that doesn't mean that girls can't have it either. It affects roughly 1 in 20 Australians. Now, that figure I don't believe is very accurate because a lot of that is undiagnosed.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah, but we do see that it's roughly increasing by about 5% each year.
Right.
Girls, there's 2 different sorts of ADHD. There's 2 different categories. There's inattentive or hyperactive. So that's ADD versus ADHD.
Yep.
But the most common presentation is combined type, which is a mixture of both of those. So girls, it can be exactly the same as boys, really. They can have the hyperactivity, the inattention, the impulsivity, and then or they can just have the inattentive type, which the inattentive is more likely to go under the radar because the hyperactive ones are the ones that are climbing the roof, and they get the diagnosis a lot earlier.
That's it. That's the ones you often see as little boys, and you think, oh, yep, there's one. But then I was just wondering if that, how little boys are sort of like that anyway. Most of them are sort of into everything. Like, you have a baby girl, and then you have a boy, and it's like, oh my goodness, they're so different. And I'm just wondering how that
little girls do that sort of stuff too.
True.
But it's the point for boys of what's a normal little boy versus what's an ADHD little boy. And I mean, I have 3 boys, and I can tell you that my ADHD one stands out way more than the other 2. Like, the other 2 are very, very active, but he just goes that step further every single time. He can't control his behaviour. He's just so impulsive. Okay. Like, he doesn't think about things before he does things. He has no, he has no stop button. He always has to take it that next step above. It's quite obvious to me.
And is it the hyper then crash thing, like you were saying with your husband, sort of that?
Yes.
Does he sleep well as well?
Sometimes. I mean, I tend to think of ADHD as having a really fast engine in a car, but then having bicycle brakes, right? Okay. So they've got these really powerful engines, and they rev really high, but then they can't brake very well.
That's a really good analogy.
So what they do, and one of the things that we talk about in Calming the Chaos is about calming up. Like, they kind of rev up to calm down. It's a really interesting process. So whereas other kids would sort of like calm down to go to sleep, you almost watch the ADHD child rev up to go to sleep. And it's a crash. Really they kind, their body kind of sends them, like, revs them up. Their engines run really fast. So
that's how you know they're tired.
Yes, they almost speed up, and they become clumsy, and they go almost more hyperactive.
That does remind me so much of my eldest son. He used to be like, he'd be full blast, and then suddenly you'd find him asleep on the floor next to where I was vacuuming.
Yes, and these are the ones that really scream to go to sleep too.
He did. He screamed so much as a baby. That's interesting. It's super interesting, and that's what I mean, there's such a misconception about ADHD in general, that it's just a lack of discipline or it's a naughty child, and I just can't stand it, and what I feel for is the parents. Like, I genuinely believe that children, the ADHD can be managed quite well, but what I want to do is I want to support the parents that are dealing with this issue, because I think that there is just such a lack of support there for the parents. So you go to the pediatrician, you get this hefty diagnosis, you get told all these awful things, and then what do you, then you walk out the door with this child with this great burden on your shoulders, not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, and so we went through, we're just trying everything, just trying to find this support. And so that's what I want to do. I want to help the parents in the actual home. How do we create the home environment that that is going to nurture these children? How do we protect their self-esteem? Because we know that that's something that takes a huge hit for the ADHD kids. You know, like I want to help the parents safeguard all that sort of stuff. And it really does start with the parents. It's how the parents manage this disorder that, you know, that makes or breaks the ADHD kid. You know, it's the parents are exhausted, and so many on the Facebook groups are just surviving. They're just living day to day.
So sorry, you go.
No, I was just going to say it's not good enough to just survive in life. Like, this is our one shot. We have to be happy, you know, like, you know, we have to be functioning. And that's what I want to do. That's my passion, is to help other parents, because I've been through it and I live it every day just like they are. And I know that it can be better. I really do.
That's so good. So when someone comes to you, or when they begin your program, what would be the first steps that you would give them to start working on?
Okay, so what we do is we take them through, basically they get an email every day, and they get an action step every day. And I try not to overwhelm them with too much content, because I know that these are the parents that are struggling. You know, these are the parents that are already overwhelmed. So we go through some general information, you know, questions to ask your pediatrician, how to find a good occupational therapist, how to talk to your teachers about your child, because that can be a big problem for parents, you know, not getting involved in the school, getting negative feedback from teachers and things like that. So we go through all of that side of things, and then we start introducing routines. We look at the parents. We want to get the parents modelling the correct behaviour first, and then so the parents start routine in their own lives, and then we introduce it into the children, and we call it creating an organisational buffer, so that no matter what crazy stuff is going on in your house, and there will be crazy stuff, you know, like my son's like, you know, doing really out there things, you can handle it better if you are organised, and you know that you've got dinner on the table, and your other kids are your bath and everything. You've got more energy to deal with those big outbursts and the meltdowns and things. Like, if the parents have that sense of calm, then it has a beautiful flow-on effect for all the children. And we stop feeding into that, because ADHD kids are sensory seeking, so they're wanting big reactions from us all the time. They want us to get worked up, because that's the level that's what they're seeking. And whether it's positive or negative, they want the big reaction. So what we want to do is give them the big reaction for the positive stuff and not the negatives, because we don't want to feed the wrong beast. We don't want to feed the negative beast, because that's what they'll bring to the table if they're getting that reaction from us all the time. So we talk about setting up and modelling the correct behaviours a lot of the time. We even go into things like laundry and like creating a laundry schedule. And we want the ADHD kids they have problems with forward planning. So we want them to be able to lay out their clothes for the week and think about, okay, is Friday sports day? Like, okay, let's get the Friday uniform out. You know, when we're trying to teach them these life skills, because right now we're treating a child that has at the acute stage that can't get their shoes on for school. But in the future, and this is something that we've all got to be aware of, is these are the adults that aren't going to be able to hold a job because they can't get to work on time. You know, so we want to give them these skills when they're young, so that they can manage it better as an adult.
Oh, that's good. So
so it's all about the basic stuff, like the routine, keeping the house tidy, and we call it practical minimalism.
Decluttering.
Decluttering, school bags, organisation, getting the kids to put their things in the school bag the night before, what to do if your child has a meltdown, how to bring back family dinners and things like that, so that your child feels connected with the family. There's so much, even like how to survive car trips with an ADHD child, because that can be an intense exercise. A lot of it just comes down to being super organised and predicting problems. And so if you can predict that your child has a problem in grocery shops and things like that, you can create strategies. A lot of it's about visual aids and planning it out with the child beforehand, asking the child, what do you want me to do if your brain gets overloaded here? Like, what can I do to help you if you have a meltdown?
That's really good.
And if you ask the child, they're more likely to take ownership of whatever solution that they provide. It's really, really clever. And I've been working with, doctors and occupational therapists and things like that to create this program, because I just think that this is the information that parents need to know about. It's how to survive it, how to make your life easier on a day-to-day basis, because it's a struggle. It really is. I think
when you're in the midst of it, and you're so overwhelmed and you're barely surviving each day, you just can't think of all these strategies. And so it's so good to have it there, like you say, an email, okay, today I'm going to work on this. Someone there to remind you until it becomes a habit. It's so good.
And it's just little steps every day. So we just do like one action step, and I provide everyone with all the visual cues and the routines, and I'm taking all the work out of it.
That's a lot of organising just to do all that.
Well, it's a little change every day that lead up to the big change, because that's where the magic happens. You know, it's the lots of little things for these parents that create this beautiful, beautiful change. And then, you know, once the parents are calmer, you watch how the kids behave. Like if you've got more energy to deal with your child, it's beautiful. It's magic. You know, like my son still has meltdowns. He still freaks out, you know, but I'm in a place that is better to handle it. I'm not reacting to everything.
Yeah.
You know, I've got like an internal strategy going on, so I can actually take a step back and not get involved in that behavior and deal with it on a calmer level. You know, not freak out next to him.
Not burst into tears as well.
Yes, and not say things that you regret, because that's often what happens. You know, you watch this behaviour and some of it is unacceptable, and it's a lot of judging that comes along with other parents.
Oh, of course,
looking at you know, with children with this behaviour, and you know, but once you have these things in place and you have that organisational buffer and you're in your routine and you know things are going sort of semi smoothly most of the time, you can you've got the strength to deal with it.
That's so good. So
super exciting.
Yeah, so that's where you work with the routines first, kind of thing, and then what was the other thing you mentioned? There was 3.
So there's 3. So there's routines, then practical minimalism. So we look at the home. We go through everything for the strategies for running a house when you have a child with ADHD, because we really want to model those behaviours, and we want to clear the house up so there's not too much stimulation going on, and make sure the house is running very smoothly. So we look at meal planning. We look at you know, like where do you put your school bags and organisation and all that, and you know, laying the clothes out and all that sort of stuff. And then we talk about, you know, that rigorous exercise as well. We look at after school activities. We talk about overscheduling of children, screen time, that sort of stuff, because screen time is one of the biggest issues you ask most pediatricians that kids are facing today, and particularly for ADHD children, because it's instant gratification and their ability to hyperfocus. They're all hyperfocusing on the screen time. So,
and it makes it easier for the parents, I guess, because they're like, well, good, they're out of my hair.
but
it's not great for them long term.
So you know, we talk about everything that you would come across as a parent of a child with ADHD, and we're just looking at, you know, little life hacks. Our ultimate goal is to make the parent's life easier, and then, you know, we're not really treating the child other than with visual cues. We're really just helping the parents, and I think that is where the magic happens, because, you know, it's that flow-on effect.
Oh, of course, it's got to start with the parents. And
these are the guys that are having the worst time of it, you know, and you know, these kids are magical, but we've got to be able to give them the tools so they can show us that. You know, it's support them in the right way.
It's funny, a lot of this stuff I worked out. It's just like, you know, things come into your life and you go, oh yeah, that would be really good. When I actually had my first baby, I was given a book that talked about how the importance of having routines for children and how to put a flexible routine into place in your family right from the time they're really small, and how to work that out as they grow, and, you know, expanding the freedom as they get older, and helping them to take ownership of their, you know, their responsibilities, and you know, giving them more freedom as they show responsibility. And so I really worked on that with my kids, and I'm so glad I did, because I think, like, especially with my son and with Isaac, with all their, you know, probably ADHD for Simeon and the OCD and anxiety for Isaac, I think I would have been in a much worse place if I hadn't put that foundation in. And so thankfully I found that when they were young. And also I don't know if you remember, there was, I think she's still around, there's a website called Fly Lady. Have you heard of her?
No, I haven't.
It's an American one, and when the kids were little I used her website a lot, and it talks about putting routines into place for kids. And so you'd have things like you'd work out, like you said, planning for the next day, putting your clothes out for school for the next day and your books, and that would all be laid out the night before, and you'd have, your routine each day. And that just helped so much. So I can really see, I think most people I talk to don't do that with their kids, not in a really structured way, unless they've been taught that from somebody. So I think it's such a good thing that you're doing, because it does make a gigantic difference. And I would have friends say to me, how do you get so much done in the mornings? And it was only because we had these routines in place, and you just get more done. Like you do. I could have meal cooked for dinner, around breakfast time, I'd have breakfast and dinner cooked, or things like that, because you were working on keeping that routine going. But yeah,
I think it's important for all children, but it's just highlighted more when you have ADHD, because they are so comforted by that routine.
They cope so much better with it. Yeah. Can you tell us, so when you've been developing this program, have you worked with any other kids yourself, or basically it's just based on your own family? Or
it is based on my own family, but I have, as I said, I ADHD people seem to I think the universe throws these things at you, and they seem to navigate. I think every child in my street has ADHD. I don't know. But,
that woman lives there in this street, to buy a house here.
It's really amazing. But I've what it came about, because parents came into my home, and then they were saying, I think this would, friends of family friends and things. I think this would help us. What is it that you're doing here? What's this chart about? And they'd see all our visual cues everywhere, and our charts and everything, and ask questions about it, and then want to copy it and want to be a part of it. And so, they are based on, I've worked a lot with an occupational therapist who has ADHD himself, and he's amazing. They are based on that, but really I can only say that it's based on my family's experience and just trial and error. This has been 10 years in the making of just running experiments on my two ADHD. I even messed up the house. I let the house go to absolute chaos. Right?
Really?
And watched what their behaviour was like, and what their body movements were like, and then compared it with what it was like when it was nice and clear and ordered. And it was incredible. My husband was like a caged animal in the messy house. He wanted to get outside. He couldn't stand being in the room. And his body language was all jerky, and he was everywhere. Like his thoughts were bouncing, from one thing to the other, versus when it's nice and calm and when everything's ordered, he's able to relax a little bit more. It's really interesting. It's, brain stuff that I'll never understand, but it's super interesting.
You've seen it work practically, and this is what I love. You can go to university and learn all this stuff from a book and from a lecturer, but when you're living it, I think you can so powerfully help other people.
Well, most parents know that routine is important, right? We all get told it, but what we don't get told is how to integrate that into everyday life, and that's what this is about. How do you do it every day? Like, it's no good to have a routine. It's no good to have a routine on a child's wall, but no one ever looks at it.
Exactly. Yeah.
We need to integrate it into everyday life. Like, it needs to be second nature.
And I know one mistake I've made in the past was getting too ambitious with my routine, and I'd have this routine that was planned out for like every 15 minutes up on the wall, and after 2 days it was too hard and nobody did it. So learning to have that flexibility and to build it in a doable way. So I'm sure that's what you're helping people do.
Well, yeah, there has to be flexibility. Life isn't all structure.
No.
But what you've got to do, and this is what is incredibly important for the parents, we always talk about modelling the correct behaviour. So we say to them, this is what's happened. Now we need to stop this and do this. And, you're showing them how to react when things don't go to plan.
Yeah, of course.
you know, using visual cues is incredibly powerful. So say, you know, if you have to go to the butcher, the baker, the fruit shop and the post office, you know, what I will do is I have a pen and paper in my car and I'll draw a big circle, I'll draw a little house, and I'll have like write down butcher, baker, like an arrows going to each one. Then I'll get my son to hold it. And I'll say, you're in charge of this list, buddy. So you know, make sure that we go to all the stops, and you know, I write down what we need to get at each place. So then he sees the big circle going back to home.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, and I pretend that I forget where we're going all the time. So I'm very forgetful. So I say to him, oh, what's that next stop? Where are we going? Like, Xavier, where are we going? And he's like, oh, it's the butcher next. And so and all of that is just training his brain that what he's going to have to do when he's older to sequence things, you know. He's going to have to, you know, plan out so that he doesn't just go to one stop, forget everything and come home.
Yes.
You know, we're encouraging him to plan it out, and we're also showing him that we are coming back home. Like, these are the stops that we have to make.
Really love that. Just that. Yeah. That's such a good tip right there, making it a circle going back to home, not just a list.
Yes, yeah. You just draw it out. Little pictures, takes 2 seconds, but gosh, it saves on the meltdowns. Because, you know,
go.
Yeah.
Sorry. I get excited.
So do I. But, you know, it's just about, you know, giving him that visual map. He's a very visual child. You know, we're showing him that we're coming home. We're showing him the stops. I'm giving him control of it because he's ticking it off as we're going. Yes. And I'm prompting him all the time. What are we doing next, buddy? You know, like, you know, remind mummy what we're doing next. And it saves on so much drama because a minute takes like hours for ADHD kids. So you're really planning it out for him. Yeah.
And do you find that they're quite visual? Because I have with mine.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's how they learn better and how they cope better. And it's just about the messages going the brain, like the pathways. I think someone explained it to me as if, you know, when you write something down, they've got to think about what those words mean, and it bounces back and forth a few times. But if you've got pictures, it's kind of like they don't have to think about it too much. Yeah.
I think that I've really noticed that with Simi, that if I've taught him something with drawing it out, he'll get it. But if it's an abstract concept, it'll take forever. So there's different ways of teaching them as well, because I've found this with homeschooling. It's they have a different way to learn.
Yes, yeah. Well, yes, you would. I mean, that's amazing in my eyes, like that you can homeschool your children. And like, I think that's absolutely incredible.
Well, an occupational therapist who knows us really well said to me, it's actually really good that you did homeschool him, because he wouldn't have been at school. He would have just been outside the box and he would have had a really hard time. But because I could spend that one-on-one time with him, it was good. It was really good. But it wasn't easy.
Yeah, of course.
He was the one that took, you know, the others, he probably took twice as long to learn to read. And it was all, you had to find different strategies for him. So I always had the idea that he probably had ADHD, but I didn't, you know, go and get a diagnosis, because like you were saying, I felt like, well, you go to the doctor, you get the diagnosis, and then what? I mean, I'm still going to have to figure out how to work with him as an individual, whether he has a diagnosis or not. But I love what you're doing, because for those parents who go, well, okay, we've got this diagnosis, but what do we do now? They've just got the tools right there with your program.
I mean, there is some benefit to having a formal diagnosis if they're going to conventional school, because they get extra time and things like that, and movement breaks, and the school can really work with them. But if you're homeschooling, you know, there really isn't, you know,
it's not quite the same.
It's not quite the same.
And I didn't know as much about it back then anyway, so it was kind of like a vague thing to me. But it's also been really interesting to see the effect that diet has on him. So what do you find with that side of things?
We have heavily experimented with diet. We've done, you know, fail-safe, RPA, GAPS. You know, we've done a lot in terms of diet. And I constantly, I have no doubt that preservatives, additives, colouring, and all that sort of stuff. It's really quite remarkable how much modern food plays a part in these behaviours. And we do touch on this in the course about taking these things out. I mean, my priority at this stage of the game for parents that have a child with this diagnosis is to really keep an open mind about all different treatment options and to explore things about explore everything, because depending on where your child sits in the spectrum, and ADHD is almost never just ADHD, it's ADHD coupled with learning disabilities or autism or Tourette's, or it's all on this, or being gifted, it's all on the same spectrum. You've got to find out what works for your child. Undoubtedly for Xavier, colorings, preservatives and things like that play a role. I can see it. His whole body morphs into like this monster of of intensity when he has these things. I'm often caught between wanting him to feel, not wanting him to feel too different in social circumstances because he already feels different. But we do keep a really tight rein in the things that I can control. So we eat organic food. We don't have any preservatives, colors, things like that. It's very much a whole food diet. Gluten and dairy are kept to an absolute minimum. It's so we are very much pro just having a healthy diet. I mean, I've got an autoimmune disease, so I'm very much there as well. And I can see the power of what food you put in your mouth, how it makes you feel.
Have you noticed with like vegetable oils, like when they're out and they have things with vegetable oils, have you noticed a change in their behaviour over the next couple of days?
I haven't noticed vegetable oils as such. I mean, it's something that we don't have a huge amount of, but it's been more, the most striking things are colours. Like that is the most striking.
And I guess
that's the most obvious for me.
Yeah, I guess that would be different for every child anyway.
Oh, of course.
But I just really noticed with Simi that like if he goes out and has, hot chips, wedges or whatever when he's out with friends, I don't know I'm not really sure if it's the starchy foods and the sugars or if it's the vegetable oils, but something sets him off and he'll be really anxious for a couple of days after.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, every
to pin it down, but
it is, and it's so individual as well. I mean, I know myself, I can't tolerate eggs on any level.
Right.
Like I can't. I've tried so many things to bring them back in. I know it's incredibly bad, but it's so. I know. I really want to, but it's quite an individual thing, and I really think that it's something that needs to be explored, and I don't ever want people to think that that food doesn't matter, because it does matter. To what I don't know. For my son in particular, whether it's the whole picture though. Like I don't think it ever is
just the whole picture.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. There's so many variables to health and well-being, and you just can't pin it down just to food, but it does make a big difference.
Of course.
As I really believe. Puzzle.
Yeah, well that's right. It's about getting the balance of lots of things. So, like getting sleep right, getting stress right, getting food right, getting getting routine right. Like there's all these little factors that it's never one thing, it's a combination of things, that we have to get right.
The good thing about talking about this is someone may have been working so hard on food and, working really hard on getting out into nature and drinking good water and being in the sunshine and exercise and all that, but they hadn't thought about something like routine, or they hadn't thought about something like, one of the other things that you talk about in your program. So that could be a missing piece of the puzzle for them. So it's so good that, you've put this together in a program. So how can people find out more about your program? I'm sure there's people listening that are dying to know.
I would love for that. I'd love to be able to help these people. Yeah. It's www.thefunctionalfamily.com. And the course for ADHD is called Calming the Chaos. In the future, I'm working on one for how to run a house when you have an autoimmune disease, because that's something that we know very well. Yes. So I want to produce that as well. But the functional family is the priority at the moment, is about helping these families that have, that are affected with ADHD. And, I really, it's something that I feel strongly about, as you can probably tell.
Great.
I want these kids to be celebrated.
Yeah.
I just think that at the moment we're trying to push them in the background, and they should be brought forward. They should be, which actually is what they exactly should be when you put them in sports and classrooms and things. You should sit them at the front. But in socially, I want them to be us to push them forward, to raise them up, to build up their self-esteem, to tell them how wonderful they are, because they truly are. You know,
and I've found with my son he's very affected by my words or anyone's words. If I, like you said earlier about focusing on celebrating the good behaviour, even at 19, if I praise him, he just blossoms. He just does anything for you. He wants to, you know, he's happy. You know, if you give him that positive feedback, and you've got that, you know, when you notice things that he's done, and you know, say thank you, and you say you've done a great job with that or whatever, he just really blossoms. But if you jump on him for anything, he completely crashes. And I know that can be also a personality thing with different kids. They feel loved in different ways. But I think that's a really big important part of the picture too, is the way you talk to them, isn't it?
Words are important, you know, and you know, we can say, you know, especially talking about challenging behaviours in front of our kids and things like that, oh, you know, that's just him, you know, like, and people make dismissive remarks, you know, oh, he's out of control and stuff like that. Well, no, they're not out of control. They're having trouble regulating their behaviour, yes. But, you know, like we've got to be careful about the things that you say to our children, because these kids have huge problems with self-esteem. Yes. Like they grow up believing that they are wrong, basically. Yeah. And so we want to make sure that we build them up. And, you know, I talked to you before about that suicide rate, and, you know, and it's critical that we look after their self-esteem, because they're in a world that tells them that they're broken, and they're not broken. They're just different. It's a neurological difference. Yeah. And they are quite brilliant. You know, and we've got to help them find the thing that they're brilliant at. You know?
That's so good. That's really encouraging. And I hope that parents out there with struggling with all the overwhelm of ADHD in the family will really be encouraged by this podcast, because I think it's a really good thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is like my purpose, and I really feel it. I just want to help.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
And, awesome. You know, and that's why I love what you do as well. I mean, I've followed Quirky Cooking forever. I mean, it's giving people hope and you know, and practical strategies on how to improve their life. Yeah, it's no good to just say we've got to do this and got to do this, but here are the steps on how to do it. And it's you know, you can make a huge impact on people's lives, you know, that are living with this issue.
One more question. For those parents listening that go, I really would like to do this program, but I can't fit another thing in my life right now. It's so overwhelming. It's not a program where you have to keep up to a time schedule of do this day, do that day. Is it kind of like you take it and do it in your own pace?
So what we do is we try and make each step incredibly manageable. So it's a short video and a little bit of text each day, then followed by an action step. So what we encourage the parents to do is to sort of get up in the morning, do a quick read of whatever, or, you know, watch the 1-minute video and
put
then
it into your schedule.
And then make a plan on how they're going to action that step each day. Now, they do have 12 weeks access. It's a 6-week course. Yeah. They've got 12 weeks access, but I've made sure in the very first video that I talk about if you need extra time, they're welcome to extra time. Yeah.
That's good.
I don't want to add to these families' overwhelm. Yeah. But the same token, we know that when they do these steps, they're going to get more time back. Yeah. So they're going to feel less overwhelmed. You know, sometimes the hardest bit is just getting started.
Oh, it is. I've bought programs online before, and it's like a timed thing, and I can't seem to get that first one done, and then the time's run out, and then it's gone, and it's like, But to have that, like you say, you've got a bit of flexibility with the time, but it's good once you get started.
Well, I want people to finish the course. That's my priority, because I want them to get the results. You know, I know that it works. I want to get to the stage where their family is functioning better. And I want them to feel that sense that, you know, of that their family is functioning better and that they're happier.
Yeah.
So we want to get them through it. So I don't want to give them forever to finish it, because I know that that's usually when people don't finish anything, is if they don't have any deadline.
Yeah.
But the same token, I don't want to add to any overwhelm. So there is, I'm working closely with these families and making sure that they are getting the results that they need to, that we're addressing issues as they come up, because that's my priority. I want these families to be functioning well.
Yeah. Well, that's so good. Well, thank you so much for that. And I think we'll finish off there, but I'll put links in the notes, on the show notes, for everyone to click through to your site, and they can go and have a read. And I guess you've got Facebook, Instagram?
Yes.
What have you got?
So got the Functional Family on Facebook, and also the Functional Family on Instagram as well. So I'm always putting on free tips and things like that for parents, like how to survive the hairdresser. How to do
my goodness, yes. You're giving me flashbacks of my boy's childhood.
Lots of little free bits of information as well, and it's always an evolving process as well. I'm always adding content and adding little bits and pieces as we come across different struggles. But, it's super exciting times here.
Oh, that's so good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and all the best with the program, and I hope it really takes off and it reaches a lot of people, because I think it's really important.
Oh, thank you, Jo. I'm really grateful for your support.
Thank you so much. We'll chat to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.